One of the most powerful forces shaping modern human behavior is not money. It is reinforcement. Human beings move toward what rewards them emotionally and psychologically. We repeat behaviors that make us feel desired, significant, validated, chosen, powerful, or emotionally alive. And when it comes to relationships between men and women, two rewards sit at the center of almost everything: sex and attention. These are not simply pleasures, they are psychological reinforcers. They shape identity, confidence, attachment, and behavior more than most people realize. Entire industries now revolve around extracting, selling, amplifying, or monetizing them. Social media runs on attention, dating culture runs on desire. Modern relationships increasingly revolve around who gives these rewards, who withholds them, and who controls access to them. And the reason these forces are so powerful is because men and women often experience them differently psychologically. For many men, sex becomes one of the most emotionally reinforcing experiences they can receive. For many women, attention functions similarly. Being emotionally seen, desired, validated, prioritized, pursued, and emotionally engaged with can become deeply psychologically rewarding. And because these reinforcers are not symmetrical, modern relationships increasingly contain strange emotional power dynamics. People influence each other through what they reward, and eventually, entire cultures begin reorganizing themselves around the pursuit of reinforcement itself. One of the most important things people misunderstand about relationships is that human beings are constantly conditioning each other psychologically. Every reward shapes behavior. Every reinforcement teaches the nervous system what to repeat. And when rewards become emotionally powerful enough, people begin unconsciously organizing enormous portions of their lives around obtaining them. This is where sex and attention become so psychologically significant. For many men, sex is not merely physical pleasure. It reinforces identity, desirability, confidence, masculinity, emotional significance, and self-worth. Sexual acceptance often feels emotionally validating at a very deep level because it signals you are wanted. And being wanted changes how a man experiences himself psychologically. Likewise, for many women, attention becomes emotionally reinforcing in similar ways. Attention is not simply conversation or visibility. Psychologically, attention often carries validation, desire, emotional recognition, social value, importance, reassurance, psychological significance. Attention says, you matter. And being made to feel significant can become deeply emotionally regulating. This is why modern dating culture increasingly revolves around invisible reinforcement loops. Men seek sexual validation, women seek attentional validation. And both sexes unconsciously learn behaviors that maximize access to those rewards. Human beings adapt to reinforcement remarkably quickly. If certain behaviors consistently produce emotional rewards, those behaviors become strengthened psychologically. Over time, people stop responding to stated ideals and start responding to actual reinforcement patterns. This explains many contradictions in modern dating culture. For example, women often publicly claim they want emotionally available, kind, emotionally mature men, and many genuinely believe this consciously. But human attraction is shaped less by verbal ideals and more by emotional reinforcement. If women repeatedly reward emotionally unavailable, narcissistic, highly confident, or unpredictable men sexually, then male psychology adapts to those reinforcement patterns. Men begin learning this behavior works, not because men are inherently manipulative, but because reinforcement shapes behavior more powerfully than moral instruction. People repeat what gets rewarded. This principle governs almost every aspect of human psychology. Likewise, men continuously reinforce female attention-seeking behavior at massive scale. Modern women now receive extraordinary quantities of validation through social media, dating apps, likes, comments, messages, orbiters, public visibility, male attention economies. And because attention itself is emotionally reinforcing, many women unconsciously organize behavior around maximizing it. Not always maliciously, not always consciously, but psychologically, reinforcement changes identity. The brain begins associating visibility with worth, desire with significance, attention with emotional regulation. This is why losing attention often feels emotionally painful. Many women experience emotional withdrawal when validation decreases because the nervous system became conditioned to external reinforcement. Social media intensified this process enormously. For most of human history, female attention economies were naturally limited by geography and social structure. A woman might receive validation from a relatively small social environment. Now, a single attractive woman can receive attention from thousands of men instantly. This fundamentally changes dating psychology, because if a woman is already receiving massive amounts of attentional reinforcement externally, then the emotional leverage inside relationships shifts dramatically. She no longer depends on one man for validation psychologically. She may still desire intimacy, partnership, or emotional closeness, but her primary reinforcing good already flows continuously from society itself. This creates asymmetrical dynamics. Modern relationships struggle understanding openly. Many men now provide women with validation, attention, desire, emotional reassurance, compliments, social engagement, without receiving reciprocal intimacy, exclusivity, or commitment in return. And this occurs constantly at population scale. Billions of interactions every day involve men giving attentional reinforcement freely. Likes, messages, reactions, comments, passive validation, emotional energy, visibility. Modern women increasingly live inside continuous streams of reinforcement. And reinforcement changes psychology. This is why attention became emotionally addictive for many people, regardless of gender. The brain becomes conditioned through intermittent validation. Not every post succeeds, not every interaction rewards. But its occasional reinforcement strengthens behavior even more powerfully than consistent reinforcement. This is classic conditioning psychology. Intermittent rewards create obsession. Slot machines work this way. Social media works this way. Dating apps work this way. Human beings become emotionally fixated on unpredictable validation because uncertainty intensifies dopamine release psychologically. And modern dating culture increasingly exploits this mechanism continuously. People now curate identities not simply for self-expression, but for reinforcement acquisition. Attention became emotional currency. Visibility became emotional survival. Being ignored increasingly feels psychologically threatening because invisibility now feels equivalent to insignificance. This affects men too. Men also become addicted to female attention, female validation, female desire. Many men emotionally collapse after rejection not because sex itself disappears, but because rejection threatens identity psychologically. The nervous system interprets rejection as evidence of low value. Likewise, women often experience emotional distress when attention decreases because visibility itself became tied to self-worth. This is why modern relationships increasingly feel emotionally unstable. People enter relationships already conditioned by external reinforcement economies. A man competes not only against other men physically present, but against infinite streams of digital validation constantly surrounding women psychologically. And women often compete against idealized beauty standards amplified through endless online visibility. Everyone becomes emotionally overstimulated and psychologically dysregulated. Meanwhile, authentic intimacy quietly weakens because intimacy requires presence. Attention economies reward performance. Intimacy rewards vulnerability. Attention rewards visibility. and modern culture increasingly trains people to prioritize visibility over connection. This creates a deeply lonely paradox. People receive more attention than ever before, while often feeling less emotionally fulfilled than ever before. One of the most important consequences of reinforcement psychology is that power inside relationships often belongs to the person controlling access to the most emotionally desired reward. And because men and women are often reinforced differently psychologically, modern relationships contain asymmetrical emotional power dynamics many people sense intuitively but struggle articulating openly. For many men, sexual exclusivity carries enormous emotional significance because sex itself functions as one of the strongest reinforcers of male attachment, validation, and emotional satisfaction. Men often organize commitment psychologically around access to exclusive sexual intimacy. For many women, however, attention functions similarly. Emotional validation, being seen, being emotionally prioritized, desired, admired, pursued, and socially reinforced often carry enormous psychological value. And this is where modern relationship dynamics become complicated. Because in most committed relationships, men are expected to surrender sexual optionality completely. Faithfulness is considered healthy, moral, necessary, and emotionally appropriate. But women are often still socially permitted and sometimes encouraged to continue receiving large amounts of external attention and validation outside the relationship itself. Social media intensified this asymmetry dramatically. A woman in a committed relationship may still receive messages, likes, compliments, male attention, social admiration, orbiters, emotional reinforcement, visibility continuously from outside sources while expecting full sexual exclusivity from her partner. Psychologically, this creates imbalance. Because if sex is the primary reinforcing good for many men and attention is the primary reinforcing good for many women, then the relationship often becomes asymmetrical. The man relinquishes access to his strongest external reinforcer while the woman continues receiving hers constantly. This directly affects power dynamics, not because women are consciously manipulating men necessarily, but because optionality itself creates psychological leverage. The person with greater access to external reinforcement usually experiences greater emotional security and relational power. This is why many modern men increasingly feel psychologically replaceable inside relationships. They sense often correctly that women now possess access to nearly limitless attentional reinforcement through digital culture. A woman no longer needs to leave the relationship physically to receive emotional validation externally. She can receive it instantly online. And because attention is psychologically reinforcing, the nervous system adapts to expecting it continuously. This does not mean every woman is disloyal. It means modern environments radically changed reinforcement structures. For most of human history, attention was relatively scarce and localized. Today, attention became industrialized. Entire technological systems now compete for human attention because attention itself became one of the most valuable currencies in existence. And women often occupy uniquely powerful positions inside these economies because male attention flows toward female beauty almost automatically at population scale. This changes relational psychology profoundly. A man in a committed relationship who pursues external sex is generally condemned immediately because society recognizes sexual exclusivity as a major relational boundary. But when men express discomfort with women receiving large quantities of external validation and attention online, those concerns are often dismissed as insecurity, possessiveness, or control. And yet, psychologically, the discomfort frequently emerges from reinforcement asymmetry rather than irrational jealousy alone. Because attention itself functions as emotional currency. Being desired repeatedly conditions the nervous system psychologically. It maintains optionality. It preserves external validation streams. It reinforces self-worth externally rather than internally. And this influences relationship dynamics, whether people openly admit it or not. This is also why many modern relationships increasingly feel unstable beneath the surface, despite appearing progressive or emotionally evolved publicly. The relationship itself often no longer functions as the primary source of emotional reinforcement. Social media does, external validation does, visibility does, public attention does, and once external reinforcement becomes psychologically stronger than relational intimacy, commitment naturally weakens. Because reinforcement always shapes behavior. Always, human beings move toward what rewards them emotionally. If public validation consistently produces stronger emotional stimulation than private intimacy, many people unconsciously begin prioritizing attention economies over emotional depth. This affects both sexes. Men become addicted to sexual novelty, pornography, and external validation. Women become addicted to visibility, attention, admiration, and social reinforcement. And both addictions quietly erode emotional presence. People become conditioned to chase stimulation rather than cultivate intimacy. This is why modern dating often feels performative instead of emotionally safe. Many people no longer know how to exist relationally without reinforcement loops constantly operating in the background. Every interaction becomes tied to validation. Who texted first? Who posted what? Who received attention? Who still has options? Who is more desired? The relationship slowly becomes a marketplace of emotional leverage rather than a sanctuary of emotional trust. And this creates profound loneliness beneath modern hyperconnectivity, because attention is not the same thing as intimacy. Being desired is not the same thing as being deeply known. Visibility is not the same thing as emotional safety. And sex itself, while deeply reinforcing, cannot fully replace genuine connection either. Many people now experience enormous amounts of stimulation while remaining emotionally starving internally. That starvation matters psychologically, because human beings do not merely crave reinforcement, they crave significance. They want to feel uniquely chosen, emotionally valued, emotionally safe, emotionally irreplaceable. But reinforcement economies often produce the opposite psychological effect. Endless attention creates comparison. Endless options create instability. Endless validation creates emotional dependency. And dependency on external reinforcement always leaves the nervous system vulnerable, because external reinforcement is inherently unstable. Today, people adore you. Tomorrow, they ignore you. Today, you feel desired. Tomorrow, invisible. This instability explains much of the emotional anxiety surrounding modern relationships. People increasingly outsource self-worth to attention and desire rather than grounding identity internally or relationally. And once identity becomes tied to reinforcement, human beings become extraordinarily easy to manipulate psychologically. In the end, sex and attention are powerful not simply because they feel good. They are powerful because they reinforce identity. They tell human beings, you are desired, you are valuable, you matter. And people will organize astonishing amounts of behavior around obtaining those emotional signals. Entire relationships, industries, social systems, and online platforms now revolve around reinforcement economies built from desire and validation. That is why modern culture feels increasingly emotionally addictive. Attention became currency. Visibility became status. Desire became emotional proof of worth. And slowly, many people stopped seeking intimacy itself and started seeking reinforcement instead. But reinforcement and connection are not the same thing. Attention can stimulate the ego while leaving the soul empty. Sex can reinforce desire while still lacking emotional safety. Social media can create visibility while deepening loneliness. And this is the paradox modern people increasingly live inside. Never more seen, yet never more emotionally uncertain. Because human beings do not only want stimulation, they want significance, they want to feel uniquely valued, emotionally safe, emotionally chosen, and genuinely understood beyond performance or desirability. But when self-worth becomes dependent on external reinforcement, people slowly become psychologically controlled by attention and desire itself. And perhaps that is the deeper danger modern relationships now face. Not sex, not attention, but forgetting that neither of them can fully replace genuine intimacy, emotional trust, and real human connection.